So hello everyone and welcome to the Deercast. This is one of the last episodes in our reloading series. Today we're going to be talking about powder dispensing. There are a few different ways to do it, but regardless of how you're doing it, there are a few bits of equipment that you're going to need regardless. So the first one is a decent sort of shell holder. And basically this is one from Hornady. And lots of sort of little segments in here, and essentially all you do with it, is it stands and holds your bullets like that, cases like that. The reason they're really useful is as you're filling them up with powder, if you've just left them on the side, as in just standing on the table, and you knock them, they're going to fall over and powder's going to go everywhere. Whereas if they're standing in one of these holders, even if you knock it, it's not going to fall over. And it's just quite a good way of organising them. The second thing you're going to want is some sort of funnel. And one specifically for reloading and specifically for your caliber. They normally come in a bit of a range. So again, this one's from Hornady, and this is a 22 to 45 caliber funnel, and that just sits over there. And the reason that's really useful is that then when you're pouring powder, you literally just dump it straight in there and it goes down into the case, rather than trying to aim it in a tiny little case mouth like that. So the two decisions you've got to make when it comes to powder dispensing. The first one is how you're going to measure it, and the second one is how you're going to dispense it. If we start with how you're going to measure it, what I mean by that is once you've dispensed your powder charge, you're going to need some way of knowing whether that's what you were aiming for or not. The two different choices you really have when it comes to that is the first one is to have a set of electronic scales like this. So once you've dispensed your powder charge, you pop it on the scales here, and it will give you a reading as to whether you're high, low, or absolutely bang on. If you're slightly more old-fashioned, you can go for a sort of balance beam set of scales like this. I tend to prefer these to the electronic ones. They don't need calibrating, they don't sort of need time to warm up, they don't need time to settle, and I just find them a bit more trustworthy than the electronic scales. That said, use this one quite a lot from Hornady, and it seems to be one of the most accurate and sort of long-lasting of all the ones out there. I had some, I think, from MTM, and I found that if I was reloading sort of a batch of 50 rounds, I'd find by the sort of 30, 40s that I was getting slightly strange readings in terms of powder measurements. So the second choice you've got to make is how you're going to dispense your powder. And in order to show you some of the different choices, I've got them set up just over my shoulder. So I'm going to quickly turn around and talk you through those. So when it comes to powder dispensing, you've got three choices to my mind. The first one is using scoops. I don't actually have any here, so I can't really show you them, but essentially, if you imagine a scoop like you would use for, say, protein powder or something like that, you scoop your powder out and dump it in the case or onto the measure, and then add a little bit more on or take a little bit less off. The theory being that the scoops sort of work in volume, and therefore volume to weight ratio should be sort of roughly about right. They're fine if you want to get sort of very rough powder charges, but if you want sort of real consistency or accuracy, they're not really the way to go, and that's primarily the reason I don't have one here. I think I've binned all of mine. The second choice, and we're sort of going up in terms of price bracket here really, is one of these, and this one's a Lee powder dispenser, this one's a Hornady powder dispenser, the Hornady being a much better constructed version of the one from Lee. So this one from Lee, all of this is plastic. You have a lever here, I suppose, for want of a better phrase, that you essentially add twist this nozzle here and add on how many units you want. Once that's done, it's screwed in place. Throw this lever here, and it will dispense powder that we sat in this hopper here. Powder comes out of this spout here into normally a sort of dispensing pan that you'd then put into your case. When you've dispensed it from there, if you put it on your scales and it's not quite right, in terms of it's a little bit low, you'd use one of these, which is called a powder trickler. So you fill the top of it here with powder, and as you twist this handle here, it will very, very slowly trickle powder out of the end here. So what you probably can't see is that these tubes tend to be sort of almost rifled, as in they've got rifling inside them, or some sort of grooves cut into them. So as you're twisting it, powder is very slowly moving its way down the tube and out of the end there, and that helps you get up to your weight. This is a Hornady version of this Lee powder dispenser. Unlike the Lee version, whilst this bit here is still plastic, all of the rest of this is solid metal. It's a much more robust, heavy duty unit. Works in very much the same way. You've got a spindle here that you dial essentially to get to your desired powder measure. With this one here, it's a little bit more trial and error. This one has a scale on it, whereas this is, from what I can gather, unless I'm doing it completely wrong, you keep twisting this and keep dispensing charges until you reach the charge weight you're after, and then once you've set that, you then just leave that alone and don't adjust this again. Or what Hornady suggests is you get various different versions of this bit here, one for each powder charge or one for each caliber, and you can just slot these in and out. So once it's set, it's sort of set for life. And again, works in exactly the same way. So you throw the handle up here, let it come down, and it'll dispense powder out of here, normally into your powder tray. What I found, so I can't remember how much exactly this was, but it'd be sort of 30, 40 quid, which is 100 and something pounds. And you do see, in terms of both materials, a big difference, but also in terms of consistency. When this is throwing powder charges, this is just much more consistent. So you end up spending a lot less time with your powder trickler. This is just a stand I've built for it. You can buy stands for this to sit in. Unfortunately, there just don't seem to be any on sale anywhere at the moment, so I've quickly fashioned this one out of a bit of wood. You have to excuse my craftsmanship. The third and final option, and I suspect someone will probably say there are other options out there, is to go on to something like this, which is an electronic powder dispenser. So it works in this very similar way to all of the others, in terms of you fill this with powder, you dial in here what the powder charge is you're trying to achieve, and this will then, it's basically got its own sort of powder trickler here, will basically dispense into this, and using the inbuilt scale that sits underneath it will tell you, or it will stop when it reaches the powder charge that you were after. And then essentially, sorry, this is a dust cover, you take your powder pan off, pour that into your case, pop it back on, and it will go on and do the next charge for you. This was about £350, 100 and something pounds, 30 to 40 quid. So you can see there's quite a big difference in terms of price. This promises to be accurate to 0.1 of a grain each time. So the hope is with having something like this, you're both more accurate but also a lot quicker, because this has got inbuilt scales and it's dispensing it for you. So in theory, you can get on with other bits and pieces whilst you're at it. Sorry, the dog's trying to say hello. So those are the three different options out there for you to consider when you're choosing how to dispense powder. So there you have it, everyone. That is powder dispensing. So to run through that all again from the beginning, powder goes into one of your various different powder dispensing items, for want of a better phrase. Dispense your powder, check it across the scale. Once you're happy that it is the correct powder charge, it goes into your case, which is hopefully sitting in a nice tray like this. The best way of getting it in was with a funnel like that. Once that's done, you'll then move on to seating bullets, which is what we're going to cover in our next video. What I always suggest when it comes to powder dispensing is to try and do sort of batches in one go, because I find I tend to be more consistent. So what I mean by that is load a batch of 50 in one go, rather than doing 10 one evening, 10 the next evening, 10 the following evening. I tend to find I get less fluctuations if I do a big batch in one go. What I'd also suggest is that you do, if you're experimenting with a new load or you're starting for the first time, is to load different increments of powder, because if you just decide on a random load of powder and load up 50, you might find that powder charge doesn't work particularly well. So always worth having a few different choices. Thank you very much for joining, everyone. As per usual, please remember to comment, like and subscribe. And we hope to see you on the next one when we'll be talking about seating bullets.